Thanks to Clarence, he got me on the board on 2021. I never gave up.
Board, if we could take our seats, please. Board members, if we could take our seats, please. Board members, come on, we got a lot to do tonight. I know y'all are gonna get hungry in 2 hours, and I wanna make sure I can get you home, get you fed. I wanna welcome everyone to the May meeting of Queens Community Board 6. I want to pay a special welcome tonight to our former council member, Ms. Karen Kosowitz. It is wonderful to see you. Okay, if we could all stand, please, and turn to the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank y'all. Please have a seat. Tonight, we have a few members, as you will notice, attending this meeting remotely. They are Dr. Renee Mara, Pat Morgan, Diana Rocknayev, Heidi Chang, and Sherry Rolnick. To those attending remotely, remember tonight you must be seen and heard for the entirety of the meeting or you will be counted as absent. However, you can and should keep your phones muted until you intend to speak. Use the raised hand function if you want to speak. Tonight, Brentley Winstead will be monitoring the laptop and will be monitoring what happens online during our hybrid meeting. So if he misses anything, if you see someone raising their hand, just raise your hand and we'll try to hook that up and fix that. So there's that. And then tonight, we're going to now start our meeting with the public forum. For those who are here for the first time, we start our meetings with the public forum because we believe that the community is the focus of our work. So we should start by listening to the community first before we jump into our work. Tonight, we have only 4 public speakers, and they are all from in the community. Individual speakers from Community Board 6 will get 3 minutes, and organization representatives from within Community Board 6 will get 5 minutes. Speakers, when I call you to come up, you can come up here. We'll give you the microphone. Peter Beadle will be my timekeeper tonight. He will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining, and when you are done, you can return to your seat. So I'm first going to call someone very familiar to us, Jennifer Martin from Parkside Memorial Chapel. Would love to see you. Come on down. After their public comments, we will then move into good and welfare.
Thank you so much. I always enjoy coming here. My name is Jennifer Martin. I am a funeral director and the director of public relations, community relations for 4 funeral homes under one roof. Schwartz Brothers, it's the most popular name in the community, now with Parkside with us, and Sinai Chapels, and Forest Park Funeral Home. So, we're a funeral home, but we do free events that have nothing to do with funerals. So I like to come here every month and tell you what we have for the month. Tonight I'm going to tell you what we have this month and next month, but I'll be back again next month too. So on Wednesday, May 29th, we have Nick Hirshon, who is, he's a professor, he's a journalist, and he's going to talk about Queens Boulevard, history, landmarks. He's going to talk about all the real old, popular landmarks that are on Queens Boulevard, things that you didn't even know about it. It's a visual presentation. It is not a walking tour. The information is over there, so please feel free to take it. In June, this is definitely going to be a favorite. strategies to get organized and declutter. So we have Tina O'Keefe from Stow and Behold, and she's going to come. Both of these events are at 6:30. We made them a little bit later so that we accommodate people coming from work. That's Tuesday, June 18th. Free parking in our parking lot, always nosh. And I'm open to suggestions. If there's an event or a speaker or anything that you would find interesting, take one of these flyers, give me a call, shoot me an email, and if we can make it happen, we will. Thank you again for allowing me to present these, and these are becoming more and more popular, so we're quite excited. We get a beautiful turnout, and I get wonderful feedback, so I hope to see you.
Thank you so much. Next is Mr. David Zucker. Mr. David Zucker, if you would come forward. David Zucker has been a public member of our Land Use Committee, and he's going to be talking to you tonight. David, you'll get 3 minutes, and when you have 30 seconds
Can you
left.
hear me?
No, hold on, we gotta give you a
I'm
microphone.
supposed to give a speech.
David, we have to give you a microphone first, because we have to hear you for the recording, no matter how loud you are.
I'm here to urge this August body next year to organize a well-publicized meeting on local law 97 for the community. This is a totally misunderstood law. At this meeting, we should have elected representatives from the state, and of course our city council person. For the city, there was something called local law 1197. I don't know if it's been passed. It's supposed to ameliorate some of the injustices of the original law. This is a very confusing law if you're not used to green stuff. I was a green commercial, a certified green commercial appraiser for 3 years. I was a member of the Urban Green Institute. It's a little easier for me. If you go to the opening page on the website, it begins with your building. The first thing you see is a penalty. Maybe it makes sense. How? Why? When? Not really explained. So what you have to do is include, beside elected representatives, is have somebody from the city who originated, not the city college people, they administer, they're clerks. You need the people who helped to organize this in the first place. There are a number of them, and I heard some of them speak before my accident. The final thing is, this is just the opening page. By the way, I'm shaking because I haven't given a speech. I used to teach speechify decades ago. First speech in almost 15 years. Anyway, if you go in here, you're going to find lots of information on borrowing. Wait a minute. 1 or 2 lines on the real estate board is applying for a change in J51. It's more advanced than that. I know that. I spoke to a couple of our state representatives here at meetings over the past year. But what is it exactly? There's a lot of fear out there. Older people on limited incomes who don't have pensions. Adults with families with 2 kids going to colleges, they're really scared. I've been talking to them in my shul. One man was a president of a small co-op. He said his local law 11 and 97 is going to bankrupt them. He's moving to Florida. But most people are staying. They just want clarification so they can plan and know what they're getting into. That's it.
All right, okay, next we have Steve Strauss, who's going to come up to speak. Steve, where are you? I saw you come in. Come on down. Steve, if you want to sit in the leverage chair, that would be fine. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, my name is Steve Strauss. I live at 10 Holder Place. I was coming back this week to speak about the Forest Hill Stadium Long Island Railroad project. From a process standpoint, I would like to say 2 things. One is, I hope the board will think about figuring out a way to make resolutions available in advance for members of the community to look at, so we can come up here and talk to you in a more informed manner. I think Manhattan boards generally do that, but I need to do a little more research on that. The other thing related to that, I did go to the Transportation Committee meeting last month, where this was discussed, and it was on Zoom. And another process question is, I think it would be good if the community board required all of our community board members to list their full names on however you do it, so that they show up on the Zoom, because you are semi-official people carrying out a semi-official function for the city. So it would be a good idea if we knew who they were speaking and talking about issues. I would like. I have been told that the resolution you will consider tonight talks about elevators, and I support elevators, but I'd really also like you to focus on the platform extension. Right now, they're proposing to extend the platform by 3 cars or so, 3 or 4 cars leading to the east. If they extended it to the west, it would have much lower impact, because on the south side, at least of the station, it would front against the tennis courts and the Barstow Gardens maintenance facilities, so there would be no impact on any residential folks. It would also be a great benefit for some of the complaints about the concerts at Westside Stadium, of people coming through the community to get to the stadium from the subway and the Long Island Railroad. By extending the platform to the west, you get a new stair at the western end of the outbound platform, and so people can come from Grand Central and Penn Station and get off at the western end and not have to go through as much of Forest Hills unless they wanted something to eat or drink on their way to a concert. So I think this would be a great idea. At the last meeting, when I raised this to the Long Island Railroad and MTA Capital Construction, they said, oh, we can't do this because there's a signal tower there. And yes, there is a signal tower, but I talked to some people who know something about signals. That's no reason why the platform could go around them. If they need to build some fencing so no one can climb up on the signal tower, I'm sure they could do that. I believe there's enough space to get a platform around it. So just hope you would consider adding that issue to this. I don't know what the best direction necessarily would be for the north platform on the north side, but it would certainly affect a lot fewer people if the outbound platform did not extend east. It won't affect me either way because I live east of where the end of the eastern extension is going to be, but I still think it's a better thing to do. And I do hope we get elevators, and I think we should really press our elected officials to press the Long Island. I spoke to Congresswoman Meng about this. Thanks.
Steve, thank you for the feedback. That's really helpful. We can only get better if we work together as a community. And Steve really understands that. He's been really helpful and constructive, specifically because he lives down by the railroad. He does get in touch with us often, and that's actually really helpful because we can't have eyes and ears everywhere. So Steve, thank you tonight for coming, and thank you for your feedback as usual. Next up would be Daniel Solo. Daniel, can you come on down? Daniel's also a public member of one of our committees as well. Daniel, good evening.
Good evening, members of the board and the public. All right, so I'm here tonight to express my support for the presentation that we're going to be hearing later today, City of Yes. So like many renters today, I am feeling immense pressure from the rising rents. Wages today cannot keep up with the high cost of living, leading to a major rent burden. It's simply too expensive to lead a fulfilling life here in New York City anymore. Currently, my wife and I are now looking for a 1-bedroom in Forest Hills. And if we look on Zillow, StreetEasy, and Apartment.com, these are the realtor websites we have available, they're asking over $3,000 for spaces only 600 to 700 square feet. Not big at all. So I was disappointed when I learned that Kathy Hochul, our governor, her statewide housing plan failed to materialize after an organized resistance, particularly from Eastern Queens and Long Island. By failing to deliver new housing, existing and future New Yorkers are being priced out of their communities every day. Many of us are hurting, while the minority homeowners are enjoying an increase in their home values. But I'm hopeful. The City of Yes plan will revise.
We don't do that here. We may not agree, but we do not do that here because I don't want that done to you. Because I may not agree with you, but if I don't hear you out, I lose out on understanding your perspective, which is going to be way different than mine because you live somewhere way different than mine. You're at a different stage in life than I am. So I need to hear from you. So please hear from him. You don't have to agree. You don't have to applaud, but you will not interrupt. Am I clear? Thank you.
So I am hopeful. The City of Yes plan, as I've heard it in other presentations, revises the zoning text written back in the 1960s to reflect existing needs in 2024. Land, particularly by the subway stations, should have the maximum density allotted because that is where people need to be so they can commute to their jobs. City of Yes also has benefits for the entrepreneurs who want to open businesses and revitalize our downtowns. Outdated zoning texts place artificial barriers on businesses opening, so it forces owners to put off their dreams and seek other communities for them to invest in. I know we've all seen the for lease and for rent signs on Austin Street. So in closing, I ask you tonight to not let fear dictate housing policy and let data speak for itself. We need housing and we need it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, we're going to now move into the board member good and welfare tonight. Can someone get Jean Silva a microphone? She has a good and welfare. Where's the nearest one? There, thank you. Guys, tonight, make sure everything that is said, I'll get you in a second, is said into a microphone so we can get into our recording because we have people who are going to want to hear tonight's meeting. Jean, proceed.
Thank you.
Turn it on, baby. There's a button, you got to push the top button. Got it?
Got it. I have two things. One is I handed out a survey for Flushing Meadow Corona Park. Please take a look at it. It'll only take you a few minutes to do and give it. Just throw it in my basket on the way out the door. That's number one. Number two, Flushing Meadow this past week had 12 individual events for Earth Day. The park was moving and grooving, and it was fun. Also, what's happening this weekend, on Sunday the 12th at 10 o'clock, the Urban Park Rangers are bringing the owls, the hawks, and you name whatever has wings that flies to this Unisphere, and we're going to fly them around. Now this is my favorite one. Everybody mark your calendar, May 25th. We got the canoeing back on Willow Lake. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, 11 o'clock in the morning, and it's at Field 13. Meet up there, and we'll put you in a canoe. You will not believe how nice and quiet it is to just float around Willow Lake. On that course, I'm going to float right down to my chair. Have a good week.
Thank you, Jean. Okay, Mark, go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. With little fanfare or publicity, DSNY released its most recent waste characterization study. Here are some of the highlights. New Yorkers discarded fewer pounds of refuse in the periods evaluated for the 223 waste characterization study than in any previous study years. Metal, glass, plastic, and paper recycling outcomes have declined from previous study years, while contaminations have increased. The New York City Department of Sanitation began the first ever borough-wide curbside organics collection program in Queens, concurrently with the 2023 study. The organic material diversion findings in this study reflect a program in its infancy and do not demonstrate the full impact of the curbside organics collection. If you notice, they're not saying what percentage. They're only saying, however, there are early signs of success, such as a low 4% contamination rate, the highlighted contamination rate about organic recycling. As of now, all community composting sites, including the one in the farmers market, will be closing on May 19th. These sites provide education regarding the importance of recycling as well as supporting composting. The Save Our Compost Coalition is still fighting to have this budget restored for community composting. Also, even with the support of numerous council members and community boards, Big Reuse Composting site at Queensbridge is still closing on June 30th to accommodate New York City Parks to create a parking lot where they work to build a new park over there. If you would want to get involved in any of these efforts to push back against these items, you can email me at fhgtinc@gmail.com. Second, on Thursday, May 16th in the morning, the Forest Hills Green Team will be organizing a weeding, planting, and watering activity at our Yellowstone Street site. That's on Austin Street that's on Yellowstone between Burns and Austin. If you're interested in helping us out, please email me again at fhgtinc@gmail.com. I'd appreciate it kind of letting us know so we know how much equipment to bring. And then finally, Central Queens Against Hate will be meeting tomorrow evening at 7:30 to plan our next Breaking Bread Building Bonds meal. If you would like this link to the virtual meeting, please email me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay. All right, and then last but not least, Heidi Chang. We're going to pass the mic. Heidi, just give us 2 seconds. Go ahead.
Hi, first, I want to thank the community board for attending the health safety fair on Sunday. I thought it was great that you were there. Second, our precinct council is having our meeting next Wednesday, 7:30 at the American Legion Hall. Hope everyone can come.
Anybody else on the board? No? Okay, then next I would like to call up one of our new council members to Queens Community Board 6, Council Member Robert Holden. Come on down.
No more money, no more money.
Thank you, Heather. Now, I come from community boards, 30 years on Community Board 5, your neighbor. I served on 7 committees. I should have had my head examined because I was never home. My wife still complains about that. She says, you were never home to do the homework with the kids. Well, that was planned, actually. I didn't, because I used to teach college, and the last thing I wanted to do when I got out of school was to do homework with my kids. So I got away with that, but I still hear it today. So don't get on too many committees. I know that participation is important. Pick your spots, pick what you like, but I want to welcome the new council members. But 30 years on the community board, I know what it's like. I know it's frustrating at times. I know there's long hours. Some committee meetings go into the wee hours. Especially, I was public safety chair, and did that for a while. And that went on for a long time because obviously we wanted to question COs of the precincts and so forth. But by the way, speaking of precincts, I passed the 112, and Heather was in my office with Christine. Was it March? I think it was. She visited my office in Maspeth, and we talked about. I've always had a problem with Yellowstone by the precinct where it narrows to one lane because the police cars are parked all over. Now they have the barriers. Is that working? Yeah, it's kind of like.
No.
It's not. It's better. It's a little better, but they don't really give enough lane space. So I'm going to speak to Captain Cordero again. Spoke to him recently. Asked him when I first met with him. I told him about that. That was back in January. But I don't like. There's a big police van at the bus stop there too. And that's just unacceptable because obviously people have to get off and they want to go to the curb and they can't and they have to block traffic. So we're going to keep working on that. So but I just want to talk about the city of yes, which I call the city of no, because it's not a one size fits all. It's not a one size fits all because let me tell you, as a civic leader, and I was a civic leader, president of Juniper Park Civic for 25 years. And then I was also Little League coach. I ran baseball leagues. So I was very much involved in the neighborhood. And we downzoned. We worked hard on city. By the way, the civic associations back in the 90s and the early 2000s, city planning said, we don't have enough personnel to downzone your area. So I said, we'll do it. So we got 85 volunteers. We logged every house in Middle Village and Maspeth, which was where we covered. And we didn't want overdevelopment. We want to go in our backyards and feel the sun. And again, the reason why I'm saying this is not a one size fits all. Some neighborhoods may well like this. The neighborhood that I represented as a civic leader, we downzoned. We did all the extra work to downzone the area and not have, and then fought against the basement apartments, which. If you look, and I listen to the police scanner a lot, there was many problems from those basements, not to mention the flooding, but it was a huge problem with too many people in a house at one time. And we had the most overcrowded school district back then, and so forth. There's a whole bunch of things that I won't get into, I won't bore you with. But the problem that we see now, anybody have flooding in their neighborhoods? I certainly do. We have a lot of flooding. What would this do to that problem? More, obviously, global warming, more rain, heavier rains, more flooding. Cooper Avenue underpass, by the way, which is an area I represent in Glendale, gets flooded right to the top of the trestle. So we have to get the fire department to rescue the people in the cars who are buried under a flood. Tell me what the city of Yes is doing about that, about the infrastructure. Nothing. All right, they're not addressing it. And when I spoke to the commissioner of DEP, he said, well, you know, we need more housing. Yeah, but you got to build the infrastructure first. You have to build more sewers, you have to expand the sewers, but you have to do other things. You have to expand transportation, because my district, most of my district, except this part, I represent Regal Park now, parts of Regal Park, the Crescents, in your area, and those are, housing stock is like most of my district, 1 and 2 family. So we have special needs. Like I said, we have flooding. We don't have great transportation. They didn't even increase the express bus service. My wife takes the express bus in the morning and pays double for the honor. And then has to leave work, even though she works late. She has to leave by 7 because they don't want to run it extended hours. So I asked the MTA to do that, you know, and they wouldn't do that. And she won't get a senior discount either. So tell me, what do we get for this? Just more overcrowding, more problems. And by the way, let's mention parking too, because they're going to eliminate a lot of parking requirements that we fought for, by the way, in the 90s, because we can't park anywhere. They want us out of our cars. I get it. I understand that. But you got to give us then transportation. And they didn't do that. So, by the way, I have a bill before the city council that requires DOT to now identify hydrants, because people are blocking them almost every block in Ridgewood and Glendale. The fire department in the area, I went to visit the firehouse, Myrtle Turtles, by the way, that's the name of the firehouse. Myrtle Turtles, which is a catchy name, but I don't know if it's a proper name for a fire department response. But they said to me, they came up with an idea for the building. They said, can you put up a marker in the street of a hydrant so we can find the hydrant? So in the middle of the street, a stencil. I'm not asking for, like in Long Island, have a flag sometimes to identify where the hydrant is, but I think somebody will take that, use it in the city of New York, but a stencil they can't take. So I have that bill. It's got a lot of support in the council. DOT, of course, don't think we need it, but we need it because we can't park. They're parking in crosswalks. That's why I created, you know, I was the chair of technology in the council. I created, you know, an extension of 311. Now we can send photos. That's what the committee did. Now we could actually have more pull-down menus on the 311 app. Anybody use that? 311 app you should use. Especially, it's much faster. I do about 7 or 8 of those a night. I walk through my neighborhood. Before I go to bed, I walk around the neighborhood and get all the commercial vehicles. But you see how many abuses there are of parking. Just go into your neighborhood, look at the crosswalks that are blocked, look at the hydrants that are blocked, look at the double parking that's happening in some neighborhoods. City of Yes will only exacerbate that to the point where it's going to get a lot worse by not putting in parking requirements. Some neighborhoods require that, right? Some neighborhoods are low density, right? So why would they just say, all right, we're going to do this one size fits all for all the neighborhoods? Let me talk about some of my legislation. I talked about obviously the hydrant, but e-bike legislation. I think all e-bikes, you know, class 1, 2, and 3 should be licensed and should have something to identify them, accountability. Because I met with so many groups that were people that were hit by e-bikes. Anybody almost hit by an e-bike or an e-scooter? If you're a pedestrian in New York City, the answer probably is yes. And it happened to be a number of times. And when they hit people, they keep going, many of them. How many are observing traffic laws? How many of those e-bikes do you see stopping at traffic lights? Stopping or going on the sidewalks or delivering everywhere, one-way streets? You gotta have eyes in the back of your head if you're a pedestrian. So all I'm asking for is accountability. I'd rather not do this bill in the city council because DOT would have to manage it. But they do issue license plates for trucks now. They do have license. So I'm doing it in the city council. There are a number of state officials that have some similar bills in the state. Jennifer Rajkumar has one, the assembly member that covers part of this area. So we need to identify it. It could be a registration of $10. I don't care. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. So I don't want to discourage people from using bicycles, but e-bikes can go up to 25 miles an hour, if not 30, if they're sort of souped up. So that's got 31 co-sponsors in the city council. The majority of the council members have signed on, except Transportation Alternatives doesn't like it. And I asked them, what's your solution? Build more bike lanes, protected bike lanes. Okay, build more bike lanes, let's do that. Okay, but when we get to a corner, what happens? If they go through the red light, what happens? If they hit a pedestrian, what happens? Crickets. So I need a solution. If you don't like my bill, tell me what we should do to try to rein this in. How do you get people to stop and observe traffic laws? You can't have a cop in every corner. So congestion pricing is also something I don't agree with. I think that's a big tax on us and it's penalizing us for where we live. How many people go to the hospital in Manhattan? I do. I brought my father to the VA. My mother went to NYU. She'd have to go multiple times a day, a week, and we'd go back and forth a lot. If congestion pricing comes in when I retire, I don't think I'm going to use Manhattan hospitals. That's going to be a problem because those are the best hospitals. And we deserve to travel free. We pay a toll, that should be enough, but it's again another tax, and we're not really quite sure what the MTA is going to do with the money. They'll say they're going to do this and that, and build this and elevators and do all that work, but they can't even stop fare beatings now. And a large percentage of people are fare beating still, and they can't get a handle on it. So I won't go on and on, but we have some community events. We left flyers over there. Again, it's a great pride. I always, I tried to buy a house in the Crescents, by the way, years ago. I couldn't afford it, but I settled in Middle Village. But the Crescents are near and dear to me. It's a wonderful area, and I'm glad to represent it. I also have parts of Elmhurst, which is not in this board, but I always love community boards and all the people that serve. I really appreciate it. I did the time. So many elected officials didn't come from community boards. I think more of them should, because then they'd understand the neighborhood. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the public portion of our board meeting tonight. As a reminder, we want to keep using microphones, board, as we do our business tonight, as we ask questions, as we make comments, because then it can be on the recording. To the public, this is the portion of our business meeting. So at this point, there won't be questions and comments from the public. We hope that what we say is beneficial, and we ask that should you have questions, which it's likely you do, that you feel free to reach out to the office and send your questions, and we will respond to you as quickly as we get those answers on anything that we are discussing tonight. I want to then direct the board's attention. That's completed. Okay. Okay, I want to direct our board's attention to the minutes. Did everyone have a chance to look at them? Are there any changes, any concerns, any edits? Herb, what you got for me? You got a smile and a smirk on that face. They're perfect? Folks, that is high praise. Okay, so since Herb has ordained these meetings, Okay, so do I have a motion to accept the minutes as written?
Yes.
Do I have a second?
Aye.
Okay, first, second, okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Saba was first, Martha was second. At least that's what I saw where I was looking, so if I missed you over here, sorry. Okay, so the minutes have been adopted. Thank you for that. If you are here and from the board and you have not checked in with Barbara, please do so, because we want to make sure we attribute you your attendance for tonight. I'm going to start with my chair's report tonight, and I'm going to cover a variety of things because we've been very busy. I want to first talk about the hiring process so I can give you guys an update. The hiring team has been busy this month. They have met 4 times. To date, we have screened all resume submissions and had a few first round interviews with 1 more to go. Our goal is to have a final candidate for the board to vote on at our June 18 meeting. Make a note of that, folks. That's a change. We're at the top of the month. We're going to be June 18. So that's my update on the hiring process. Street fairs. Thank you, Heidi, for your work this weekend. I also want to thank from the board, Brentley, Gladys, Sherry, Mark, and John for helping us at 2 fairs this month. Did I forget anybody? And then I also want to thank Barbara and Christine for all of their work, helping us plan, helping us have the materials, equipping us, and spending a Sunday with us at the street fairs. That was really helpful, so thank you for that. The budget priorities, I want to remind chairs, make sure that you have scheduled your committee meeting to work on your budget priorities. These must be submitted by the end of June. If you require any assistance with this project, please reach out to Mark Laster and myself. And please get your meeting scheduled because we are going to be hella tight. So you have to get your meetings scheduled because I don't want you to not get them done because we didn't have a date available. As a reminder of the policy, we do 3 committee meetings a week. We do not do 2 committees a night, 1 committee meeting a night. The reason we do only 3 committee meetings a week is to ensure that our board members aren't having to go out to 2 or 3 committee meetings a week because we know that you all have lives. Okay, so we do that to ensure that we don't burn you out. Okay, so that's budget priorities. Now, just wanted to let you all know too that the new members that are here tonight, last night were on Zoom, on WebEx with us, undergoing a training and orientation last night. It was a wonderful meeting. They asked a lot of great, strong questions. So just wanted to let you all know that as well. And then also wanted to follow up. We had promised to everyone that had come to share their concerns about the Forest Hill Stadium. Wanted to let everyone know their first concert was last weekend, so we in advance scheduled a meeting with them for Tuesday of this week. We met with them. We talked about some of the challenges they have. One of the main things has been their capacity to have proper sound abatement. They have improved in that area. DEP and NYPD agrees with that. The number of complaints were very, very different from last season, so that's good. They understand it's not perfect. They still have one particular issue that they're dealing with, and it's partly, if you know anything about sound travels on waves, and we're in hills and valleys, so that is also affecting it. So they are working on that. They recognize that it's still not perfect, but they are working to get it there. So we are continuing. We are keeping our promise. We are keeping in dialogue with them as much as possible. Social media. Do us a favor. If you're on Facebook or Twitter, please give us a follow, and then please amplify what we post if it's relevant to the folks that are in your sphere. It would be really, really helpful, specifically with meetings and so on and so forth, because we want to make sure that everyone in the community is understanding what the board does, has access to the board, and you all are connected to various different groups in this community that are unique to where you are and unique to what you do. So the more that we can get you all to amplify, the better. That would be great. Okay. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about real quickly is the City of Yes housing opportunity. Every once in a while, a very consequential item will come to this board for our scrutiny and consideration. City of Yes housing opportunity is one of those items. As most of you are aware, this has been the talk of the town this week, and understandably so. Tonight we will be getting an overview of this initiative. Then, on Monday, May 13th, we will be getting a more detailed presentation from City Planning to the Land Use Committee. It will be a virtual presentation. I am asking you all on this board to please listen carefully, question wisely, and deliberate thoroughly. Use your discernment. And it would be helpful if you did make time, if you're not on land use, to attend that meeting. If you are new members of this board, I always say land use is the physics of community board. Please make time to listen to it. You don't have to be on screen, okay? We don't have to see your lovely faces. If you have to be doing something, with your family, and we want you to be able to do that, we need you to hear this information because it's a lot. Just like it was with economic opportunity, this is going to be quite a bit. So I'm just asking for you all to really engage with this. We only have 2 months. We literally got this April 30th, and we have to have this wrapped up by the last business day in June. That's part of the reason why we moved our June meeting to June 18th, so that we would have time to deliberate and so that we wouldn't rush this through and make a decision that hadn't been properly vetted. Okay, so I just wanted to explain that to you all, and that is my report for tonight, but I want to see, are there any questions, because I've just blabbered off a lot. Martha.
For the
Microphone, Martha, it's right there. Turn it on. Vicky. Got it?
budget priority
Yes,
meeting,
ma'am.
is the end of June, from now to the end of June sufficient? Or should we do it from now until the end of May?
May is pretty booked. I would try to book your meeting for June, okay? And if you need us to resend the materials, Mark and I will resend you all of the necessary materials for your committee. Okay? Good question, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Herb? There's one on that table. Pass it on down. I don't think it's on, Herb. We turn them off to save their battery life. There you go.
Question about the noise coming from the music at the stadium.
Yes.
There was you mentioned about abatement. Does that mean that they're lowering their sound, or they're going to have walls?
No, they have been working since the end of last season with DEP and various other sound consultants to deal with soundproofing. My understanding, if you attended the concert this weekend, it was remarkably different, even when you're in the venue. So they are working on that. They are not going to be, it's not a matter of lowering what's happening, because part of the problem is the bass. And if you understand how bass works, even if you turn it down, it's still going to reverberate, because it's really, they even say that people that are deaf can hear music if it's played on the bass level. Yeah. So that's part of what they're contending with there. Hope that helps. But thank you for the question, that was good. Anything else? Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Christine, keep us moving, for the district manager's report.
Hello, everybody. I'm gonna be very brief because I know we have a lot to cover and we wanna keep things moving. I won't repeat what Heather said about the City of Yes, but I do wanna remind everybody that we are having a public hearing on June 4th. That will be a specific public hearing for the City of Yes. We don't have a location yet, but if anybody from the public that's here would like to be notified about that public hearing, you could always check our website, but we also have a sign-up sheet. You can see Barbara, and we'll make sure you get the details as soon as they're available, as well as the board members. If you want to hear what people have to say about it, we encourage you to attend that meeting. Again, you don't have to be on the land use committee to attend the committee meeting or the public hearing. All the community board members will be voting on this June 18th. So although we record our meetings and you're welcome to watch them on YouTube afterwards, we encourage everybody to attend that June 4th public hearing as well. Sunday, May 26th is the Forest Hills Memorial Day Parade. CB6 will be marching in the parade, so if anybody wants to march with us, please let us know. Barbara has a sign-up sheet in the back. If you're not sure, you can let us know. The ceremony starts at 11 a.m. at the American Legion.
12 o'clock.
I think the parade starts at 12, and I think the ceremony starts at 11. So you can get there before 12, that's good. And just let us know, because we want to have a number of people, if there's 2 people marching, then we probably won't be marching. So just let us know if you plan to come so we know how many people to expect. The last thing I want to mention is our logo competition. The deadline for our logo competition is May 15th. So if you're still working on your entries, or if you know somebody that's interested in entering, Barbara has some flyers in the back. It's also on our website, and you've gotten it in your emails. So work on those entries and tell people that you know if they're artistic and they want to make a new logo for the community board. We need to get those entries in as soon as possible. And that's it for me tonight.
Also, just a reminder, tomorrow night there's two things going on. There is the Queens Bus redesign event here at Borough Hall. It's in the Helen Marshall Center. It's from 5 to 8:30. It is basically collecting feedback. It is a drop-in. You don't have to, it's not going to be a 3.5-hour event. It's like you get out of work at 7 o'clock, you show up at 7:30. You know, it's just going to end at 8:30. So it is a drop-in as you can event here at Helen Marshall. And we're also conducting, in conjunction with Senator Adabo, we are conducting a Narcan training session at the Regal Park Library tomorrow evening at 6 o'clock. You will be trained on it and you will be given your own Narcan kit. Okay, so that's tomorrow. So now to get to the main event tonight. Now we're going to have a presentation by the Department of City Planning for the City of Yes housing opportunity. With us tonight is Andrew Wasserman, who will be giving us the presentation. Andrew, will you be able to we will go ahead, actually, because we've already got that, correct? Okay, so if you are here tonight and you are interested in receiving this presentation, again, I will say this, reach out to our office. We're all about transparency. We will shoot it off to you. We will email it to you. Just let us know. It's about 90 odd slides. We're not going to see all 90, but we can email it to you. Yes. Oh yeah, yeah, as usual at the meeting, we usually distribute all the materials from this meeting to the board on the Friday packet, correct? So expect it on Friday.
It will be.
It will be PDF.
It will be shorter. It won't be 96 pages, don't worry.
Okay, so Andrew, come on down. You can come around this way. And I think we might, okay, I was gonna say, if we could just, once he gets into position, if we could shut the lights up here, it will help.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for having me.
Can't hear you.
Can't hear me? How about now? Sorry about that. It sounds louder over here than I guess it does over there. Just want to say, happy to be here. Was a resident of Forest Hills for 5 years. Unfortunately, I now live in Kew Gardens Hills. Want to move back soon. I'm not going to get into all of that. But so thanks for joining me here. I'm Andrew Wasserman, Queensborough Planner with Department of City Planning. Just here to give as brief an overview of City of Yes for housing opportunity as I can. I'll try to cut it down since we'll go into more detail next week. Next slide, please. So, like I said, we're here to discuss City of Yes for housing opportunity, a citywide text amendment that will change zoning to allow for more equitable housing development. The changes being proposed will enable a little more housing in every neighborhood by removing barriers to housing growth. City of Yes for housing opportunity is a citywide plan that will encourage incremental housing growth over a wide geography.
Can you speak louder?
Yep, sorry. New York City faces a severe housing shortage. The vacancy rate for rental apartments is historically low, only 1.4%, far below a healthy vacancy rate that would provide New Yorkers with housing options. In Queens, the vacancy rate is even lower, only 0.88%. Because our housing demand is greater than our housing supply, New Yorkers are experiencing very high housing costs. Over half of New York City renters are rent burdened, meaning they spend over 30% of their monthly income on rent. Not enough homes is also a direct cause of homelessness. Each night in 2023, over 92,000 homeless New Yorkers slept in shelters. This included over 33,000 homeless children. Next slide. Most of New York City's housing was created in the first half of the 20th century. Since that time, housing production has fallen dramatically. That's in part because of zoning that has become increasingly restrictive since 1961. While housing production has decreased, the demand for housing has increased. There are a number of reasons for this. For example, households are generally smaller today than they used to be, meaning with even the same amount of people living in the city, we require a greater number of units. Actually, yeah, next slide, please. Trying to move it along. The proposals in City of Yes for housing opportunity emerged from the goals outlined in Where We Live NYC, the city's fair housing plan. Where We Live NYC was created by HPD in collaboration with over 250 community organizations. It highlights how the city's housing shortage and affordability crisis have severely limited New Yorkers' housing choices. In a tight housing market, landlords can charge high rents, and existing tenants are vulnerable to tenant harassment, poor housing quality, and displacement pressures as they compete with each other for a limited number of units. For prospective homeowners, it drives up home prices and pushes the goal out of reach. When there are few homes to choose from, renters pay more. In Queens, 52.8% of renters are considered rent burdened. These conditions further worsen the neighborhood-based legacies of segregation, discrimination, and concentrated poverty that have led to the deeply unequal city we have today, where neighborhoods have unequal access to resources and opportunities. The average New York City household makes about $70,000 a year, but the average two-bedroom apartment in New York City is over $2,700. That means that your average working family will have to spend about half of their income on rent to get a home for their family. New York City's dire housing shortage also has direct human consequences. These have been underscored in our extensive community engagement process. Over the past 2 years, DCP has met with over 100 groups, including housing nonprofits, tenants' rights groups, faith-based organizations, and affordable housing providers. Each of these groups was able to share a unique and valuable perspective on the lived experiences resulting from our housing crisis. When New York City fails to produce housing, all New Yorkers feel the economic consequences. When people have to spend so much of their income on housing, they have less money to spend on everything else. Allowing New York to build more housing can also help create good quality jobs in construction and residential maintenance, and add significant amounts to the city's economy and create over 260,000 jobs. Many city agencies work on policies and programs that aim to address New Yorkers' housing needs. The Department of City Planning is specifically responsible for the city's zoning. Zoning regulates what can be built on a particular site, both how large the building can be and what uses it can have, whether it's residential or commercial, for example. Sometimes zoning includes other things, like requirements for income-restricted affordable housing. But zoning does not fund new housing or directly control what can be built. It only establishes the rules for what may be built. How much housing gets built depends on many factors. Other tools the city uses to support good housing outcomes include subsidies or tax incentives, programs for affordable home ownership, and tenant protections that guarantee New Yorkers' rights. Updating our zoning can respond to these issues by increasing the number and the types of homes available in every neighborhood across the city. If each neighborhood adds a little more housing, New York City can add a lot more housing overall, without any single neighborhood experiencing dramatic changes or overtaxed infrastructure. This text amendment is the largest pro-housing change DCP has ever undertaken, and we will be touching the zoning for every part of the city. But to be clear, this is a large proposal because it affects the entire city, not because it is proposing large changes in any one neighborhood. Different proposals apply to districts of different densities. So here we see, sorry, it's small. Here we see a map of lower and higher density districts throughout the city, and specifically in CD6. So I'll move quickly. Next slide, please. So, trying to save time. Oh, sorry. So on this map, the blue areas, those are the lower density districts. So those are going to be single and smaller multifamily homes. And then the yellowish orange, depending on perspective, those are the higher density districts with apartment buildings generally. So we'll start by discussing those low density areas. So here we see lower density areas citywide, it's showing single family districts, 2-family districts, and lower density multifamily, which would be smaller apartment buildings. Next slide, please. And this is specifically within CD6. Excuse me. Exclusionary zoning rules have made it virtually impossible to build housing in many lower density neighborhoods, placing additional pressure on higher density parts of the city to produce more housing. But this wasn't always the case. Small apartment buildings and 2 to 3 family homes are common in all of New York City's lower density neighborhoods and were allowed in many places until as recently as the 1990s and early 2000s, when stricter zoning prevented them. City of Yes for Housing Opportunity will reintroduce the modest buildings that are more naturally affordable than other types of construction. Together, these changes allow for creation of more housing in lower density areas without changing neighborhood character. The first of these proposals is the Town Center proposal, which aims to create more what's known as missing middle housing in lower density areas. Missing middle refers to a category of housing that's modest in scale and often affordable to middle income residents, a once common type of housing that's not often built in the city anymore. This proposal aims to re-legalize mixed-use apartments or buildings with ground floor commercial use and a few stories of housing on top. It's a classic New York City building type that exists along many lower density commercial corridors. Overly complex zoning rules make it almost impossible to build new buildings like this today. Here we see a map of commercial overlays where town center zoning applies across the entire city. And next slide. And then here are the areas in CD6 where this would apply. So this includes, the well-known commercial areas like Austin Street and Metropolitan. And this proposal streamlines zoning rules, including restrictive limits on floor area and height, so it's once again feasible to build 2 to 4 stories of housing above a commercial ground floor. The second proposal for missing middle housing is transit-oriented development. Transit-oriented development will allow for low-rise buildings, only about 3 to 5 stories, depending on the underlying zoning, on sites that are near transit, meaning within half a mile of subway or rail station, and that meet specific criteria. First, a lot must be over 5,000 square feet. And second, the lot must be located on the short end of a block or on a wide street, which zoning defines as being over 75 feet wide. Community facilities like faith-based organizations or libraries can also use these rules throughout the city on sites, again, over 5,000 square feet, where a community facility space is present. Transit-oriented development rules would promote missing middle housing while also promoting sustainability by adding housing in areas with good transit access. In the rest of the low-density areas, we want to give homeowners more flexibility. Under this proposal, a 1 to 2 family home would be allowed to add a small accessory dwelling unit, or ADU. There are a range of types of ADUs, including backyard cottages, garage conversions, and basement apartments. These small units will provide important housing options for small households, like a young person moving into their own place for the first time, or an elderly resident who wants to age in place near family. Because of their small size, they also serve different income levels than a large single-family home. Successful ADU programs in other locations, including Austin, Seattle, and the state of Connecticut, show us that these units can give multi-generational families a little more space and help middle-class homeowners with household expenses. The proposal includes rules to ensure that ADUs are safe. New basement ADUs will not be allowed in the coastal floodplain, and no ADUs will be allowed in special coastal risk districts, areas of the city with the most severe flood risk. Outside of these coastal areas, basement ADUs may be subject to additional regulations or review. The same rule changes that enable ADUs can also help homeowners who don't want to add an ADU but need more flexibility to adapt or renovate homes to meet their needs. Our research shows us that many existing buildings are out of compliance, meaning they're not in line with today's rules. For example, R41 districts are two-family districts allowing semi-detached buildings like the ones you see here. But buildings like these 1961 duplexes cannot be constructed today because they have more square footage than is currently allowed, and their rear yards are too small. These non-compliances can cause big headaches for homeowners if they need to borrow money from the bank or if they want to make simple changes to their home, like renovating an outdated kitchen. We want to fix these rules, which would have dual benefits. First, homeowners of existing buildings won't run into issues when they go to make an alteration to their building because the zoning will better match what actually exists there. And second, you'll actually be able to build a two-family home in a two-family district or a multi-family home in a multi-family district, when today the only thing that's feasible is a single-family home. Next, we're going to turn our attention to medium and high density areas, where our focus is on creating more opportunities for housing, including affordable housing. To do this, we're proposing the Universal Affordability Preference, or UAP. It will allow apartment buildings to be about 20% larger, so long as all the extra space is occupied by permanently affordable or supportive housing. UAP is modeled after current rules that allow bigger buildings for affordable senior housing in some neighborhoods. UAP will also allow incremental housing growth in neighborhoods and encourage affordable housing throughout the city, rather than concentrating it in a few neighborhoods. This map, which again I know is small and kind of hard to see, shows which districts have existing senior housing preference today, which is shown in the lighter orange throughout the city. And, next slide, please. And then here we see where that's available within CD6. Through the UAP framework, all forms of affordable and supportive housing will be able to take advantage of the higher floor area ratios, or FARs, already provided to affordable senior housing in these areas. However, there are a few districts that don't have the senior housing preference today. Previous slide. Thanks. And you can see that's generally more applicable to other parts of the city, where in these areas we create new FARs to enable the growth of affordable and supportive housing in all neighborhoods. Shown there. This proposal would also make sure that zoning provides room to build extra affordable housing required through UAP. So there would be limited height increases where it's necessary to make an effort for these affordable homes. So what does affordability mean for UAP? UAP will have affordability requirements of 60% area median income, or AMI, which is a measure of affordability established by the federal government. At 60% AMI, which is about $76,000 per family of three, UAP will serve lower income New Yorkers than the existing zoning tool, voluntary inclusionary housing. UAP will replace voluntary inclusionary housing program, but mandatory inclusionary housing, sorry that the names are very similar, a little confusing, which requires a percentage of new developments to be income restricted affordable housing, would continue to exist and would still be mapped in areas where there are significant increases in residential density. So UAP, which we're discussing now, would be for smaller increases than that one. UAP would also serve New Yorkers at even lower income levels through income averaging. Income averaging means that instead of only including homes at the required affordability level, in this case 60% AMI, a building can include homes at a range of incomes that average to that level. So for example, a building could meet UAP's 60% AMI level by including a mix of homes at 30%, 60%, and 90% AMI, thus thus averaging to the 60% required. Through UAP's deeper affordability requirements and the introduction of income averaging, it can help serve lower income New Yorkers who most need affordable housing. So here's an example of how the universal affordability preference works. If a church shown here, located in an R6 district, wants to build affordable housing today, they'd get 3 FAR, regardless of whether they're developing market rate or affordable housing. In this case, that would allow them to build about 35 units. Under UAP, they'd get an extra 0.9 FAR, which would allow them to build about 10 to 12 more units as long as they're permanently affordable. 10 to 12 units might not sound like a lot, but keep in mind this is functioning at a citywide scale. If every project has a few more affordable units, we can add a significant amount of housing spread throughout the city so no single neighborhood experiences drastic changes. And here's another rendering of how this will work, but for time. So, next slide, please. Oh, next slide, please. So now moving on to the citywide proposals. Next slide, please. So next is the parking proposal. This proposal would make parking optional for new housing everywhere, following the example of many other major cities, all of which are far more car dependent than New York. Today, New York City requires new housing to include off-street parking even where it's not needed. These mandates mean less space for housing and increased construction costs, which results in less housing being built. The diagram on this slide shows how parking takes up a lot of space. 2 parking spaces with the necessary area for maneuvering in and out of them is equivalent to about the size of a studio apartment. Building parking itself is also expensive and is an obstacle to housing growth, especially affordable housing. To be clear, parking will still be available, and we anticipate parking will still be allowed. There's no cap on it, no limit on it, and we anticipate developers will respond to market needs and continue to provide parking in areas where it's in demand. Removing parking mandates can help reduce the cost of housing construction and enable development of more homes in each new building. Next slide, please. So here's just a brief example of how this can work. A developer can see this undersized lot that's in a great location near transit and wants to convert the lot into an apartment building. The lot can accommodate 16 homes, but the developer stops at just 10 so they can waive out of the parking requirements, because as soon as they add the 11th apartment, they would need to provide 6 parking spaces. By eliminating parking mandates, the developer can fully build out the lot to include those 6 additional apartments. 6 additional apartments, again, might not sound like a lot, but when hundreds of sites around the city are able to build a little more housing, that incremental change can result in a lot more housing for New Yorkers. Next slide, please. And there's some smaller additional proposals that will provide more housing and a wider range of housing types. First, conversions. Today, outdated rules prevent underused non-residential buildings like offices from converting to housing. For example, many buildings that were constructed after 1961 or are located outside the city's largest office centers cannot be converted into housing. The City of Yes for Housing Opportunity would make it easier for underused non-residential buildings such as offices to be converted into housing. To do this, we would make a few changes to adaptive reuse regulations. First, we would expand these regulations citywide to go beyond office districts. That way, a broader range of underused buildings like vacant schools or former religious buildings can be converted into housing. Second, the proposal would move the eligibility cutoff date from 1961 or 1977 to 1991. This would allow more recently constructed buildings to be converted into housing. And third, the proposal would enable conversions to all types of housing, including supportive and shared housing and dorms. And then as shown in the second image, the proposal would also allow small and shared apartments by limiting the dwelling unit factor, a measure of the minimum average unit size in areas with good transit access. So it would provide more housing opportunities for New Yorkers who want to live alone but don't have that option today. Finally, previous development often took place under tower in the park style regulations called height factor. Although DCP has developed a more recent set of regulations for contextual buildings that have height limits and result in better designs, Some sites, like NYCHA campuses, can't access the new rules. The proposed changes would allow height-limited infill on sites that would otherwise be forced to develop tall, skinny buildings or nothing at all. The changes I walked through today are the most significant proposals in the City of Yes for housing opportunity. Overall, this text amendment aims to create a little more housing everywhere so that each neighborhood does its part to address our housing needs, and few neighborhoods don't feel the intense pressure they do today. It's not just about more housing, though. It's also about more types of housing. Multifamily housing, where it's currently not allowed because of exclusionary zoning, homes of different sizes to meet different people's needs, and crucially, far more affordable and supportive housing. So, hard to see here again, but we encourage everyone to go online to DCP's website where there are a lot of materials. We have previous information sessions available on City Planning YouTube. You can learn a lot of information, and you can go to nyc.gov/yeshousingopportunity to access more materials and to stay informed. And then here is just an image. DCP put together a community board checklist, which people could feel free to use. It's optional, but could be helpful to organize your thoughts, check out things you might be for or against, write some notes down on there if you want. That's available. And here's just the timeline. So it was referred out at the end of April. We're currently in the 60-day review period. Yeah. Sorry, I think I've gone a little over time, so thanks everyone for listening.
Okay, now, board members, you're gonna get another chance to get a more detailed presentation on the 13th. I know that some of you have some initial questions. What we are going to do is we are going to take one question a person. So no follow-ups, no clarifications. If you need that, write it down and bring it to the meeting with you. If you cannot be at that meeting, email myself and Keith Engel your question and we will get back to you with that answer. I'll also CC Christine Nolan so that we can keep those questions together. So first I want to see a show of hands so I can make it my handy dandy list. Okay, I've got, get a clean sheet of paper. So on this side of the room, I have Latrice, and I have Martha. Then on this room, I have everybody. Now I have Peter, John, Mark, Eugene, Effie. I feel like I'm that woman who used to do the nursery school and say, I see Tommy, I see Jane. Okay, I see Gladys, Salwa, Pedro, Herb. It wouldn't be a question party without Herb. Okay, so I'm gonna move around the list just to kind of, Jean, sorry, we need you for the party. Okay, so Latrice, we'll start with you. Can she have the microphone? Yes, thank you.
Thing testing?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. My question is in regards to the construction of these smaller apartments. What mechanisms are going to be put in place to ensure that these are not just glorified SROs? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for this question. Sorry, can everyone hear me? Yes, I'm Veronica Brown. I work in the housing division at the Department of City Planning on this text amendment. So this question was about the missing middle proposals, these like small apartment buildings, and what's to ensure that these are apartment buildings rather than like single room occupancy shared buildings. So I just want to clarify the difference between a couple different proposals that Andrew walked through tonight. So first, there were two proposals for missing middle housing, which is to introduce modest apartment buildings to low-density locations in appropriate locations. So that includes the transit-oriented development proposal and the town center proposal. These would be traditional apartment buildings with, full amenity, like a kitchen, bathroom. There'd be apartments, those Class A apartments that we're all familiar with. There is a separate proposal that Andrew touched on very briefly at the end to enable small and shared apartments. And so shared apartments would include private bedrooms and shared common facilities, including kitchens or baths. We do not anticipate that shared apartments are something that will be widespread, but there is a market demand, especially for people who today might be marginally housed, or young people who are living alone for their first time and are maybe open to more of a dorm-style arrangement, that there is a demand for this, and so we would like to open up a pathway to do this. HPD, the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, has been working on developing some clearly articulated rules to develop shared housing. But again, that's a separate and smaller proposal than the missing middle proposals, which are geared towards developing modest apartments for families, working New Yorkers. Hopefully that clarifies your question.
Okay. Next is I'm gonna go to Eugene. Just gonna hop. Microphone.
So next to Metropolitan, close to my home where I live, on Metropolitan Avenue, there's a lot of really historic businesses, such as Penny Sweet Shop and a few others that are like near and dear to the neighborhood. The changing the infrastructure there and incentivizing developers to build bigger, I think, would maybe force those businesses out. Is there a process where you're going around to like business districts and just getting thoughts on whether it's appropriate for that specific business district?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So there has been extensive outreach to a variety of community groups of various kinds, including industry groups about local economy. But the town center proposal, which is geared towards commercial corridors to build a commercial ground floor and then 2 to 4 stories of housing above it, is actually not allowing something that's not allowed today. In commercial corridors and low density areas, you're already nominally allowed to build a mixed use building. This would just make some simple changes to the zoning, including to height limits, floor area limits, that would make that type of building feasible. And so we don't anticipate that every business would choose to take up on this proposal. But that it's appropriate, especially in underused areas. There's a lot of commercial corridors that aren't, maybe a treasured community staple, but are vacant or underutilized retail spaces that would benefit from being redeveloped, and that could breathe some new life into those commercial corridors.
I would say though, when we talk about height limits, those aren't small changes. I think in a sense, when we do think about some of the things that people have shared tonight about shade in their homes and so on and so forth. So I think that may seem small in your perspective, but I know for people in this community, that's something they do care about. The next person I'm gonna call on is Pedro.
Okay, thank you so much for the presentation. As a young parent in New York City, I definitely feel this housing cost, especially around people that I know that are still renting. Now, one thing I want to ask you about is parking minimums. So you do bring that up, and I do understand parking minimums, they do increase the cost of housing, etc., and all that. But I have a worry about more about the fact that there is no cap, as your colleague brought up. Because if there is no cap, then parking can become a desired resource for someone, and then they can end up moving a building and actually having less unit to have parking. For example, a couple of years ago on 3rd and 75th, there's a building, it's not there anymore. It was about 5 stories long, 5 stories tall, and it had 43 units, and it had no parking, and several first floor businesses. It got replaced, and last time I checked, it was still under construction. I just checked on Google Earth, it's still under construction, I believe. But the designs for it had an 18-story building with 38 units. So it went from 43 units to 38 units, and parking, and possibly no real estate on the first floor, because I didn't see it in the actual proposal form. There was talk about this and all that. So this is in the Upper East Side, where I believe there is no parking minimum already. So what is there to stop a developer who says, actually, I do want to add the parking because that will make it more expensive, and I want to attract a certain kind of person who will want parking. So I actually asked, why didn't you propose parking maximums, which has been proposed by other cities, such as Nashville, Tennessee, and Roanoke, Virginia, which I'm probably saying wrong because every town in Virginia is pronounced wrong. And those are, again, like you mentioned, massively car-dependent cities. And they were able to do parking maximums. And here we do, where New York City, we have a lot of rich people who do things like take 2 apartments and make a mansion. I can see them taking one of our buildings here and then saying, you don't have parking right now. I'm gonna turn it down, have less units, add the parking to make it more expensive, and now you have less units and more parking than you had before.
Yeah, thanks so much for that question and for that comment about parking maximums from your perspective. So we're not proposing parking maximums as part of this proposal because city planning's research supports that the market is the best way to determine how much parking should be provided on any individual site. There's many factors on an individual site that determine how expensive parking is to provide. For example, if you have to provide underground parking, structured parking, surface parking. And those individual cost factors, as well as market demand, determine how much parking a developer will include in any given development. So we think it's appropriate not to say any arbitrary limits of here's how much parking you must provide, or here's how much parking you can provide, but instead to let that decision be reached by an informed team of developers on a site-by-site basis. I think that the particular example that you talked about someone removing a building and replacing it with less units is perhaps a consequence of our extremely tight housing market, in which there's so little opportunities for redevelopment. The housing market becomes a zero-sum game in which for people to provide housing, they are having to remove existing housing and replace it with perhaps higher scale housing. By creating incremental housing opportunities everywhere, we think that will alleviate some of the pressure on those locations. We think that was on the Upper East Side. Some locations that are experiencing more acute pressure to provide high-end housing. That's really a consequence of our tight housing market. So, thank you.
Martha?
I thank you for your presentation, and I think I live on Metropolitan as well, and I think it actually is going to protect the neighborhood from the McMansions that has actually destroyed the other house. You're a homeowner, and now somebody buys 2 homes and builds a McMansion. I have windows, and I can't see daylight. What I'd like to know is, I hear a lot of chatter, and people are confusing this with vouchers, shelters. I think we need to do more education to really let them understand what's being happened, because this is a positive thing for the neighborhood. The neighborhood's growing. It's allowing multi-use, and it's allowing, the neighborhood's growing. It's gonna grow. It's there. Rather than having these illegal units of houses that are there already, that have basements, first floors divided into 2 dwellings, then the 3rd floor, and then a roof that's not even raised. We have a lot of that going out. We don't snitch. The snitches get stitches, but it's there. This is a legal way for us to do it the right way, to support what's actually happening and what's been happening in the neighborhood. What more can you guys do to educate the public that this is not vouchers, that this is not, shelters, a gateway to shelters and so forth? I think we need more of this, because there's a lot of chatter that this is what we're doing.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for your comment, which I think reflects a lot of what we've heard in our extended community engagement process. Over the past year, we've met with over 100 community groups. Andrew listed a few examples in the presentation. And we've heard a lot of feedback like that. We've also done a lot of education about what zoning does. What zoning does is controls what is permitted to be built. It does not fund new housing. It's different than other housing programs, such as like vouchers that you mentioned. Of course, it works in complement with other housing policies, so we've also worked closely with our colleagues at the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. But of course, there's always more outreach and education to be done. That's why we, look forward to working with the board. If anyone, is involved in some other community organization that they want us to, meet with, please email our email housingopportunity@planning.nyc.gov. We're always happy to do more outreach, more engagement. There's lots of public materials on our website, which you can access and share widely to also understand the proposal and to understand zoning more clearly.
Okay, next I'm going to call on Herb.
Yeah. One thing I just want to mention is that the visual is very important with this discussion, to visualize what you're talking about. That's not my question. My comment or question is that we talk about the details of the housing limits and footage and all that stuff. We're missing a whole chapter on destroying housing. So this is not, New York City was built up a lot on empty farmland in Brooklyn and Queens. But now you're talking about a building that can be larger or a different, and a landlord that is having like one lot where he'll do that, the next lot won't do that, one lot will do that, and the question is, have you looked into how much housing is going to be first taken away and then having to build on? Now there's a lag between that time where the people living in that building will have to find some other place to live. And that didn't seem to be touched on. It's like a social issue rather than, and it's just a matter of that we're not really talking about empty land anymore. It's all empty lot. Okay, this lot you're gonna build here, the lot is currently occupied by a building. The building might have some historical things on it, and we'd have to go to landmarks, and it might be an area where we want the brown signs, historical district or something. What do they do? It's very complicated. It's not just like people are going to now acquire footage on a lot that they have to have a certain amount of lot space, so they'll buy up all these buildings, and who knows what kind of structure will go up there, and then next to it will be this one-family house that's like, well, and it's just a matter of the streetscape and the way the city looks. Also, we could do it. I mean, but it shouldn't be done haphazardly.
Yeah. Thanks for these questions. So first, I just want to mention in terms of your, I think, most specific question about like the turnover of existing housing. I just want to mention there is a very thorough environmental review, which does look at that as, that is an element of the environmental review process, and there's no significant impact in that category of the environmental review. But I think more generally, you've brought up a question sort of about these proposals, creating change in the neighborhood, having a larger building next to a smaller building, et cetera. And so these proposals are tailored approaches, which I think aim to create context-sensitive opportunities for housing at appropriate locations. So for example, the transit-oriented development proposal, one of the missing middle housing proposal, we're talking about 3 to 5 story buildings, depending on the height limit of the underlying district. 3 stories in a single family district is actually not much taller than a single family home is allowed to be today. And we don't anticipate, because there's a variety of criteria that these sites have to meet. They have to be in the transit-oriented development area, within half a mile from a subway or rail station. They have to be over 5,000 square feet. And critically, they have to be located on a wide street or on the short end of the block. Relatively few sites will qualify. Maybe, 1 or 2 homeowners will choose to sell, and that will become, down the line, redeveloped into an apartment building. But that's one apartment building on a context-sensitive location, not a seismic change. You're totally right that we no longer have wide swaths of vacant land that we can redevelop to add housing. That's just not the reality we live in today. And so we need to create opportunities for incremental housing growth that responds to the existing built conditions of our neighborhoods, but also provides the vitally needed housing opportunities that New York City needs to thrive.
Thank you. Next, Peter.
Yes, sorry. No.
Great, thank you very much for coming for the presentation. So based on what you just said, I just want to get it really clear, because some of the chatter I've been hearing in the neighborhood is, a 3 to 5 story house isn't modest when you live on a single family house, one of these quiet side streets that are typically around 30, 40 feet wide, right? So if I understand correctly, on that kind of a street, so our Court-Meyer district, from between Yellowstone and Metropolitan and Forest Hills, the Crescents area, these are single family zone lots. Streets are about 35, 40 feet wide. There's no commercial there. If I'm living in one of those areas, I'm not waking up one morning to find that my neighbor across the street has combined 2 lots and started building a 5-story apartment building. Is that right? Or is it possible for that to happen?
Yeah, so to qualify for the transit-oriented development proposal, that could only happen, so it sounds like this specific scenario you've laid out, they're not on a wide street, they're not on a street 75 feet wide, so the only pathway, but they are the transit-oriented development area, they are within half a mile of subway or rail? Okay, well in that case, they're all, okay. Mm-hmm.
The Crescents wouldn't be, they're just outside half a mile.
Yeah.
And this other district I mentioned, Metropolitan, you're only counting rail, right, not bus. Sorry, for transit-oriented development area, that zone, you're counting from rail as opposed to bus. Even SBS doesn't trigger the condition, correct? What about express buses? Does that trigger the condition? Half a mile from subway. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, half a mile from subway or rail. So it would only meet, so this scenario would only meet, again, the criteria if it's half a mile from subway or rail, over 5,000 square feet, and since this we've established does not meet the wide street criteria, it would have to be located on the short dimension of the block. So like.
And I'm sorry, this is violating the rules, but real quickly, tell us, what is the short dimension of the block?
You're one step ahead of me. I was just about to go on with another clause to that sentence, which is the dimension of the block that's less than 230 feet long.
Sawa? No, Sawa. Yes. Sawa Baida. Take the microphone.
Very much, Christine. Thanks again for being here. What was that?
Go ahead.
Great. So I think a lot of folks that are enthusiastic about the opportunity for affordable housing are also sort of wondering, where does the other shoe drop? What don't we know? What unintended consequences are we not aware of? Some, like Peter and some other folks have laid out. And others really concerned about the infrastructure aspect, because we don't know, once that parking is gone, what will our neighborhood look like in terms of car congestion? There's already some serious parking issues. With flooding, I know you guys also mentioned it was only going to be in coastal, or there's a provision regarding coastal areas. But in Queens and in a lot of other areas, we not only experience flooding, but we experience death from folks in basements during floodings. So we sort of feel like a lot of us are excited about the housing aspect, but what are you doing infrastructure-wise? Are we talking about stormwater tree trenches? What do we have?
Great question. So first, sort of generally about infrastructure impacts, I'll point to that we did do an environmental impact statement again, but I also want to mention that the best way to mitigate infrastructure concerns is to create housing incrementally over a wide geography. If we're creating a little bit of housing in every neighborhood, one neighborhood is not experiencing a tremendous amount of growth that creates new infrastructure impacts. When a neighborhood is like rezoned with a zoning map amendment, we understand, that's why neighborhood plans take years of outreach work with our sister agencies, et cetera, in order to make sure those infrastructure needs are in place. But we have analyzed those needs, and we think we're going to continue throughout the environmental review and public review process to develop ways with our sister agencies about how any impacts could be mitigated in the limited categories in which our environmental review revealed impacts. But we think generally this strategy will mitigate those impacts overall by just creating a few units in any given neighborhood rather than a lot of units at any one location. You asked a very specific question about flooding, and I think it was specific to basement and ADU flooding, so I want to provide a little more context that was in the presentation. The presentation mentioned that no ADUs of any type will be allowed in special coastal risk districts. no subgrade ADUs will be allowed in the coastal floodplain, which is consistent with other rules for subgrade residential space. City Hall, the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, and City Planning have also convened an interagency working group that's been working for the past months to develop specific rules and regulations that would ensure that ADUs, and especially basement ADUs, are safe for tenants. We're very aware and cognizant of the lives that were lost from flooding in basement apartments, and that many people are living today in unsafe conditions in those units. This is clearly unacceptable. Basement apartments must be safe. And so we're developing a clear set of rules with the fire department, with the Department of Buildings, with the Department of Environmental Protection that can ensure these units are safe. So that those are still being developed and have not been released publicly yet, but they may include additional regulations or review for basement units.
Just for a point of information, that information would have been helpful to have now and not later, because we're having to vote on something that is contingent on something that is just getting baked in the oven. And I think it would have been helpful to have had that information now. The other problem we have in this district is we have areas that flood that are not flood zones. For example, during Ida, we had flooding along Kessel and Selfridge, especially in some of the garage areas and so on. That area, according to this plan, I believe would be safe for ADUs. We know it not to be. So that's a concern of ours because they are not. And I know that it was just a storm, but we don't just get one of those storms. We've been fortunate lately that these storms have gone around us, but other boroughs have, our fortune has been the misfortune of others. So of the Bronx, or Brooklyn, specifically on the Parkway. So we're concerned about that in our district. So I'm not asking a question, I'm just stating that is a concern that I think some of us have here, is that we have some areas that seem to be, at least according to this on its face, fine, but we know it not to be fine.
So those rules that we're developing with the interagency working group are both for ADUs throughout the entire city, as well as specific regulations for places that are sensitive to stormwater flooding. So we are very aware of this stormwater flooding issue, and we are working with the Department of Environmental Protection. We need to develop a new way to regulate this stormwater flooding, which is becoming increasingly prevalent and is sort of like a new issue that there's no established.
It's not a new issue for here. 63rd.
Sorry, it's a new issue for the regulatory framework. Yes.
Drive, you could basically take a canoe down that every time it drops rain. I mean, yes. Okay, I want to move on. Sorry, because I don't want to be monopolizing. Gladys, and then Karen.
Hi, thank you for your presentation today. Hold on. My question has to do with the language that you guys are using. You are saying a little more housing. What does that mean? Are you talking about a percentage increase based on the existing amount of housing, or are you saying a specific number? So in this area, 1,000 new homes, in this area, 500, or in this area, 2,000?
Thanks. So zoning does not set any sort of mandate on how many units could be built, or we don't know how many units will be built. But what the zoning change could accomplish is it'll change what's permitted to be built. How much gets built will of course be determined by myriad factors. So the market, etc. But what we're doing is incremental zoning changes that will allow for a little bit of housing growth in every neighborhood. We don't have specific targets, specific mandates for this neighborhood is going to produce X many units. This unit is going to produce Y many units. That is not really what zoning does. But we have, performed a thorough analysis and environmental review of how many units could be projected under, reasonable conditions and assumptions, which is a range of units that you can access in the environmental review, and we can provide more detail about that in a follow-up presentation that's more detailed.
Karen?
Thank you for your presentation today. Sort of dovetailing on the questions about existing local infrastructure, what have your assessments shown, if they've been done, about local school seats and how they kind of exist with this, growing housing capacity? And has there been consideration to kind of integrating that thought process into the housing proposals themselves? For example, if converting offices and other buildings to housing, making recommendations that those conversions include school inside the building, or daycare inside the building, or other services inside the building, because as you know, overcrowding is not unique to our district, and we don't see too many new schools popping up. And so what is the kind of overlap with decision-making about school seats and kind of how is that being integrated into this decision?
Yeah, great question. So in the environmental review, school seats is something that showed an impact as a result of this proposal, meaning there'd be like a significant change in the school capacity. That is something that we will be continuing to work throughout the environmental review process before we publish the final impact statement. We'll be working with the School Construction Authority about mitigation measures for any impacts on schools.
So what is a mitigation measure?
You know, like something you could do. A mitigation measure is like something you could do to address the impact on the school. So adding more schools, for various solutions to mitigate the impact.
Okay. Next, I'm going to go Mark.
So I was going to ask infrastructure, but I think we had a couple questions on infrastructure. So I'm going to ask another type of question. It pertains more of community board. So there's a number of proposals in this. It's a whole package. So are we required as a community board to vote the whole thing up or down? Or there are some proposals that we can vote yes, and there's some proposals we can vote no. Also, which we've done in other proposals, can we also vote up yes with conditions?
Yeah, you can vote, I think the standard like yes with conditions, no with conditions. And we provide this worksheet similar for used for zoning for economic opportunity. That includes each of the proposal elements. It includes space for you to provide a yes or a no check, as well as comments about each proposal. So, we understand you might have different opinions about different proposals. You may support some, hopefully support all, but you may not. And so you should, weigh in with your detailed feedback about each of the proposal elements. If you need additional support about filling out that worksheet or the community board, review process, the Queen's office can support additional guidance.
I was going to ask about schools, so that was kind of asked already. I'm a little nervous about you working with the SCA to get solutions, just my experience. Without more buildings, we already have a very bad situation in Queens. So anyway, so I'm going to modify my question a little based on what Mark just said. What is the latest deadline that you would be accepting major alterations or amendments to the proposals? And is there a separate deadline for minor changes?
Yes. Just like we voted on City of Yes housing opportunity, we voted economic. What did I say? I've been writing that all week long. So basically, we voted yes with conditions. So with this particular one, the committee would get together. We will review each and every one separately. Thank you, Councilmember Kozowitz, for coming tonight. It was a pleasure to have you. May you be well. Good, that'd be great. That's how we will handle this one. Now, what happens in the process? This then goes from here to the borough president's office. It is possible when it gets to the borough president's office that there are alterations made to the proposal. That is part of what is happening right now with economic opportunity. The land use group is looking at it. They are making changes. We've had some discussions with our council members about some of the potential modifications that are happening. So modifications tend to happen throughout the process. And what we've been grateful for is that our council member has been briefing us on those modifications, which is helpful. So just so you know, that's sort of how it works. Does that help with your question, Effie? Okay, next I want to call on, go to John, and then we're going to go to Jean.
Okay, first of all, thank you for really was a very clear presentation. I also would like to say I'm very glad, building upon what Mark said, that it will be presented to us in a way where we really can look at each of the specific components. Some of them we may find a lot more amenable than others. Others we may have concerns with. But mine is really just kind of running a comment toward you. I mean, we have been hearing things such as that this is going to be either even destroying zoning or doing this. Basically, this will not have any effect upon the existing floor area ratio zoning matters anywhere in the city, except insofar as the particular proposals that would be such as that community the work, the 20% increase in the FAR, things of that nature would have. And that basically, unless those things fall into that category, the same basic bulk and use standards would exist. And then it would also not rule out, on an entirely different track, other initiatives that can be done that could, even in contrast to this, which does exist a higher density, if there are areas where, say, lower density is required, that people can still do it, to say, areas that may be vulnerable to the kind of McMansion development that may exist. So this is not just going to be, you know, something that is only density and forget about any other trends. I just wanted to be clear on that this is really limited in the FAR changes to the specific items that you related and not really to anything else.
So yeah, Andrew walked through a variety of FAR changes and bulk changes. So in the low density districts, the most significant bulk changes would be the missing middle proposals, the transit-oriented development, and the town center, which would allow for 3 to 5 story apartment buildings. In a standard low density district, it's not meeting either any of those missing middle criteria. It's just a regular 1-family, 2-family, or low density multifamily district. There'll be limited, bulk changes, so small increases to FAR to better reflect what's actually built in New York City, so that a homeowner doesn't, run into issues. Changes to yards, which match what's better on the ground. A 30-foot rear yard is actually much more extensive than some, many New York City buildings have, and this creates issues for homeowners. And some other changes to minimum lot size, etc. But you're entirely correct in your understanding that the essence of the zoning districts will remain in place. A 1-family zoning district remains a 1-family district. A 2-family district remains a 2-family district. Their detached, semi-detached nature also remains in place. So the typologies that are allowed remain in place. No uses are also allowed as part of this. So if you can't build commercial today, under this proposal, you cannot build commercial tomorrow. So there's no use changes in that way. Thanks.
Yeah, you said that the basic lot size is about 230 feet long by 50 or 70 feet. That's the minimum to build on.
I'm sorry, I think I said that the short dimension of the block is 230, so the short, imagine a rectangular block. Yeah, so that's the short, that's how we're defining the short side of the block.
Okay.
So yeah.
I'm just trying to figure in my head, all right, so we have this block, okay, and we're going to build. What choice that we have? I'm just sitting here playing with, I can put on that lot, say, 12 apartments, 4 floors up, I could put 16. It's even though it's all the same size, I can make more apartments or less apartments. What determines the size of apartments that are going to be built there? And also, I haven't heard anything about disability, because the disability apartments do need extra care, especially for doorways and entryways and elevators that I'm fighting for right now. And plus, also, nothing about parks in the neighborhood. I know that's a big thing about the parks. They haven't quite decided what that category is in. And the only thing I wanted to say was when you said this share housing, it took me back to the 1930s, when in Manhattan, all the bathrooms were down the hall and everybody had their bedrooms. And if a studio apartment is 2 small cars, you're going to have a bathroom down the hall. Thank you.
Thanks. So the first question was sort of, I think, if you have a particular site you're referring to, you're welcome to follow up with us about that site. But in terms of how do we determine how many units can be built in a building, or how large the unit can be, it's determined through FAR, the floor area ratio. So you take the size of the lot, then you multiply it by the floor area ratio. So let's say, in a transit-oriented development scenario, which I think is what your question was primarily concerned with, the FARs range from 1 to 2. So 1, 1.5, or 2, depending on the underlying zoning district. So you would take that lot size. Let's imagine, a hypothetical lot that's 10,000 square feet. If it has 1 FAR, that means they could build a 10,000 square foot building. Then the developer determines how many units can fit in the building, based on obviously building code and considerations about how large the units must be. Building code, housing maintenance code set standards for that, as well as safety measures like windows. There's also a measure called dwelling unit factor, which determines how many units you can fit in a building. In the transit zone, which is not here, it's the most centrally located parts of New York City, we're eliminating the dwelling unit factor because we think it's redundant with the building code. And what the dwelling unit factor requires you to do, it doesn't set an absolute minimum size on any one unit in the building. It establishes a minimum average size across the entire building. And so that means you would have to provide a mix of small and large units to maximize your floor area. But so in central locations, we think it's appropriate to maybe build a building that only has smaller units, only studios and 1 bedrooms. And outside of the transit zone, we're reducing and simplifying the dwelling unit factor. Right now it varies according to the zoning district, reducing it and simplifying it to 500. So there'll still be controls in place that would result in a mix of units, but they'll be easier and less than they are today. So that's an overview of how many units can be built in an entire building. Happy to go into more detail with that, maybe in a follow-up presentation, or if you have a follow-up question about that. Understand that parks are an important resource. We did work closely with the Parks Department, and we're continuing to work with them throughout the environmental review process about mitigation measures to any impacts on parks and open space. And finally, I think your last comment was more of a comment about shared housing, but I just want to emphasize that shared housing is one model of housing that's, again, we think probably going to be developed in relatively limited situations, but today the Department of Housing and Preservation Development would like to build shared housing for people who need it. There's people today obviously living in informal, illegal shared housing. It's unsafe and exploitative. And we think that by allowing legal shared housing that HPD will develop clear rules for, including income-restricted shared housing, we could, create a safer living arrangement for people who today might be, renting out sort of an informal boarding house or something like that. That demonstrates a market demand for this, but we need those housing options to be safe and legal.
Okay, thank you, board, for your questions, and thank you guys for your presentation tonight. To the public that has come tonight for this presentation, it doesn't end here. I just want to be clear. On the 13th, the community board is going to be having another presentation. Actually, the land use committee will be having another presentation. It will be virtual, so you can stay home, and you can listen into our presentation. And that will be on 7 o'clock on the 13th. If you need the logistics, just call the community board office. They will share the logistics with you so that you can connect to that meeting. If you want to refer back to this meeting, it should be posted within 5 days on YouTube. And that committee meeting will also be posted on YouTube several days after that meeting. That will be another opportunity for you guys to learn more about the program. And then finally, we will be having a public hearing at the Land Use Committee hearing in person on the 4th of June. As Christine expressed before, we do not have a location at the moment for that meeting because just for different reasons. So we're working to get that nailed down. Once it is nailed down, we will push that information out to anyone that has asked for it tonight. And we're also going to be pushing that information out on social media like we've done all week to keep people informed as to our position on the past 2 City of Yeses as far as what the process is going to be going forward. So you can always, if you don't follow us on social media, on Twitter or on Facebook, and you are on Twitter or Facebook, you can follow us there. We do try to keep that stuff updated. But that's also another way. Our final, so what will happen at that committee meeting is the committee will then make a recommendation. And then that recommendation will come before the full board for its final vote on the 18th of June. So just so that you know what our calendar is and sort of what we're looking at here, so that you can engage with this project however you so choose. If you have any questions about what you've heard tonight, please call the office tomorrow. If they're not able to address that question, they will take your question back to the city agency and try to get an answer for you. That's what we do. So I know some of you are probably going to scurry out of here. That's why I wanted to just take a moment to make sure that you understood sort of what happens next, okay? So now I want to call up Gladys Sandoval. She's going to give the Consumer Affairs presentation tonight where we're going to discuss the liquor licenses.
Hi everyone, I'll be quick.
so we're voting for 2 new liquor licenses and we're voting for 4 renewals. So for the new ones, we have the Art of Grill at 9713 Queens Boulevard in Regal Park. The establishment was already approved by our board on March 2024, but they amended their application to include a sidewalk cafe, so now they're waiting also approval from the DOT. The second one is Sushi Ya, 9711 Queens Boulevard in Regal Park. The establishment was also approved by our community board back in January 2024, but the initial application was a transfer application from the previous owner. This time they're applying as a new board. For the renewals, we have 1, Abulino Restaurant, 9701 and 9703 64th Avenue in Regal Park. The second one, Painting with a Twist, 9714 Metropolitan Avenue in Forest Hills. The third one, Continental Luncheonette, 10403 Metropolitan Avenue in Forest Hills. And number 4, Black Sea Fish and Grill at 9536 Queens Boulevard in Regal Park. That's it.
There were no issues from the 112?
Yeah, thank you. No issues from the 112.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions, concerns? Okay, so we're gonna do a voice vote. Sorry, what? Oh, I need a motion, sorry. I'm just trying to keep this train moving. Okay, so moved. Okay, so, all in favor of approving the new liquor licenses, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, they are accepted. All in favor of accepting the renewal liquor licenses, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. The next thing we're going to vote on is actually something this board voted on about 14 years ago. We have received a request to have a rename or a co-naming of 64th Road and Yellowstone Boulevard in Forest Hills in honor of Dr. Daniel Malakoff. He was senselessly murdered right in front of the Annandale Playground on October 28, 2007. To tell you a little bit, we did send you the information in advance, but just a few brief things. Dr. Malakoff was a trailblazer as the first Baharian orthodontist trained at an Ivy League institution in the United States. He was renowned for his philanthropic endeavors, offering pro bono treatment to the children of first responders and those unable to afford orthodontic care. His dedication earned him numerous accolades, including the prestigious Top Orthodontist Award from the U.S. Academy of Orthodontics. He served as a mentor to his nieces, nephews, and patients, inspiring them with his wisdom, guidance. He conducted groundbreaking research projects that contributed to the advancement of the orthodontic profession. We also got a letter of recommendation from the Beth Gabriel Baharian congregation, and they said that one of the highlights from the letter says that one of his contributions was developing programs for youth, which cater to teens who lost either one or both parents. He also developed programs for the elderly to explore topics that deal with graceful aging. And that's really important when you think about our community and how our community has been for a while. In 2010, this came before our board, and the board voted unanimously to approve. And then we sent a letter, but for whatever reason, this didn't go through the council. So we're being asked to consider this once again. So I want to see first if anyone has any questions about this tonight. We don't know, and we've done extensive research. This was actually, when it was initially, I know. In 2010, Karen actually came to the meeting and spoke about Dr. Malakoff, and then our current city council member, who was a vice chair at the time, actually spoke in favor of this proposal as well. And we've spoken to our current council member to see if she recalls what occurred as far as why it didn't get moved forward, and there just doesn't seem to be any real challenge as to what the issue was. But this was a previous unanimous decision. The executive, usually these decisions go before the transportation committee, but because this was already considered, the executive committee voted to approve and to move this forward. So I'm wondering if I have a motion on the floor. John?
I will move that we reaffirm our support for the renewal.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, I have a second from Herb. Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you so very much. This will mean a lot to his community. Thank you. Next, I'm going to call on Peter. We're going to talk about, and this is actually the last item on our agenda tonight. And thank you all really for handling these questions tonight. I really appreciate it. I know the temptation is great to ask 2 or 3 questions, but y'all rocked it out. So I'm going to turn this over to Peter to do the Long Island Railroad ADA project resolution.
Okay, thank you very much. Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Peter Beadle. I'm the first vice chair of the board and chair of the Transportation Committee. In previous meetings, we discussed what's happening with the renovation project over at the Long Island Railroad. We had a good discussion at our last meeting, and since then, you all should have in front of you now a resolution that we worked on in committee. Big thanks to Salwa for helping draft some of this and correct all of my mistakes. Very much appreciated. And you know, just a quick recap, since we have some folks in the audience and on video who might not know all of the issues. When MTA proposed that they were going to do a redesign of the station in Forest Hills, primarily because they need to extend the length of their platforms, and then that also triggers a need to provide accessibility upgrades because current facilities, particularly the ramps that go up to the platforms, are not ADA compliant. When that first started, one of the first things that was very clear in this community, in which we told the LIRR, was that we needed elevators. And that was the initial plan. Congress member Grace Meng got $7 million of federal funds earmarked in order to fund those elevators, and we believe that's the direction we were moving in. We find out at the end of last year that no, MTA's had a change of mind. They've determined that new ramps, ADA compliant ramps, are sufficient, and we don't qualify for the elevators. They have needs to put those elsewhere. So, and we've been working with Forest Hills Gardens and other community partners to try and emphasize their need for these elevators. Forest Hills Rego Park is an area that's been established through studies by the DOT as an area with a high number of elderly citizens and those with mobility challenges. And plus, we're also seeing, as we build more of these buildings we've been talking about, we're seeing new waves of families coming into the neighborhood. So start thinking about strollers and the need to take your shopping cart places to get to Trader Joe's. Elevators are something we really needed. So we've been fighting as hard as we can to ensure that we try and get elevators back into this design. The most recent development is that they've awarded a contract to a construction company. It's called a design build contract. So this contract allows this company to actually plan out and design the final design for this renovation and then build it. And not only that, but it groups this project with 2 other stations out on Long Island. The theories behind all of this is that makes the entire process much more efficient, streamlined, and therefore saves money. So as we detail in the whereas clauses of this resolution that you have in front of us, one of the things we found out is that one of the stations that this is paired with is the Babylon station out on Long Island. That station currently has 2 elevators and 2 escalators that allows ADA access to each of their platforms. Under the new contract, both of those, the escalators and the elevators, will be rehabilitated, and they will also get a new set of 2 more elevators. Meanwhile, we're being told that no, you can't have elevators in this community. So, as part of our efforts to try and put more pressure on the MTA and the LIRR, we've devised this resolution calling on our local elected officials to do everything that they can to put pressure on the MTA to find sources of funding and to point out this very glaring situation in which Babylon can still have very good ADA accessibility, but give us those 2 elevators. They'll still have 2 elevators and 2 escalators. You can provide us 2 elevators as part of the same project, and it shouldn't increase the cost overall of this project because you've already funded those 2 elevators. You've just placed them at a station which doesn't seem to need them. Anyway, so that's the thrust of the resolution, and so it's brought to the full board today to consider, and I would like to move at this time, unless there's, let me start with questions. Martha.
It's not a question, I think we need to point out.
It's not a question, but it's a suggestion, and it might actually make it more significant. Babylon is Suffolk County. It's not even Nassau. So, being that they do have their own budget, we really should not be hurting because of this. It's Suffolk County.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, overall, these are state funds being used both in Babylon and here in Hollis, which is the third station that's bundled with us. But yeah, absolutely. You know, we have the density, we have the need. It's not a ridiculous request that we're making. You know, it's one that originally was part of the plan. So they have the ability to do this. We've kind of been gaslit, we feel, by some of the presentations we've received. And so that's why we bring this. Jean, and then Pedro.
Yeah, if Grace Ming didn't already put, you said putting $7 million aside for the elevators?
7 million.
You said, President, well, is there any way for her to also get involved with this pressure with the letter?
Okay, I can talk to that real quick. I'm not trying to step on Peter's toes, but I have been in pretty consistent contact with Grace Meng's office from the very start. She has been following our lead. She has been speaking to us, meeting with us, and says what you want is what we will ask for. Our only concern, you know, we're gonna pass this, you know, we're hoping to pass this. I'm an optimist. The glass is all the way full. But our concern is that we may have to, after this is passed, go back and have a discussion with them because you know, we have asked for ramps. We have asked for ramps to be heated. They've done that. But one of the things that Congressmember Meng is going to have to do is she's going to have to go back and rewrite the legislation in such a way as to facilitate for ramps. Because right now, the way it is written is it is written specifically for elevators. But what we have been told is that there's not sufficient funding for the full scope of the project that would include elevators, rehabilitated ramps, and a platform extension, and this wall that they want to build on the one side. So she has been very involved on this.
Pedro.
Yes, so I kind of just wanted to kind of bring this into the current conversation that we're having, which is that I don't know what the housing increases are going to be in Suffolk at the moment, given that the governor's housing compact fell apart, in part because of you know, Suffolk and NASA and everything else. But we are now, we're just showing a presentation where we are possibly going to be upzoning and increasing density. So I don't know if you want to add this to the resolution, which is that we're foreseeing a growing, much faster growing population in Forest Hills than we are possibly in Babylon. Again, I don't actually know what the plans are in Babylon, given the housing complex fell apart.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. You know, when they were trying to design a housing package that would cover the state more, transit-oriented development, which is a term you heard a lot tonight, was something they were trying to do further out. So that would be a situation where the Babylon station might suddenly see 3 apartment buildings across the street, and maybe the analysis would be a bit different whether or not they need those extra elevators. They're not going to do that out there in Babylon, but we are going to have to do it here because the population needs that housing, whether they make a provision for it or not. So yeah, that's a really good point. So I think we'd probably add just into the whereas clauses that whereas we also anticipate increasing density as the City of New York revises some of its zoning rules. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I'd just like to offer up a very quick friendly amendment to add Grand Central with Penn Station in the first paragraph.
In the first paragraph.
Under whereas.
It's staring me right in the face, and there it is. Gotcha.
It's very friendly.
Yep, I like it. Any other comments? Okay, So then with those two amendments to our whereas clauses, the final, there it be resolved, remained the same, that Queens Community Board 6 repeats its demand that the renovations to be conducted at the Forest Hills Long Island Railroad Station under contract number 6494 include the installation of 2 ADA accessible elevators at locations to be identified in consultation with the Community Board and the Forest Hills Gardens Corporation. Queens Community Board 6 requests that the elected members of Congress and the New York State Assembly and Senate who represent the community utilize their offices to encourage the MTA LIRR to install 2 ADA accessible elevators at the station and, if possible and needed, identify additional funding sources to help pay for the installation of these elevators. I therefore now move that we adopt this resolution and forward it to our elected members. Second. All, do you want to do that? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thank you all so very, very much tonight. All right, I believe that is, let me pull up my agenda here. Yep. Now we're going to call up the elected official representatives that are here, and if y'all can come up and line up. In the meantime, we have 2 folks. Is it 2? Is Sean still here? So we have Sean and Amparito. We'll go in alphabetical order. Amparito, then Sean, and if the elected officials would just come down, the reps would come down here, that would be great. Okay, we're promoting people. Is it just Alexa? My goodness. Oh no, Jordan's here. Jordan. Where did Kevin go? Kevin, he bounced. She was like, yeah, Karen Cosmos can leave, so can I. I get it. Okay. We're just going to do the 2 folks on the computer because I always forget them. Okay, we'll start with you.
Good evening, Jordan Goldis with Congresswoman Meng's office. Just a quick 2-minute update on our end. Last meeting I mentioned the $1 million we secured last year for the Queens Chamber of Commerce's legal desk. We actually hosted office hours in our Northeast Queens office this past week where we provided services to small business owners. The legal desk essentially provides free legal assistance, legal advice, financial assistance to local small businesses. We had a really good turnout. Several local small businesses came out, and we'll be doing it again in our Forest Hills office on May 15th. So if anybody's interested, just feel free to reach out for more details. Congresswoman Meng will also be hosting a passport event. If you remember last year, we held several, including at the Forest Hills Post Office. We'll be doing another one at the Flushing Post Office on May 19th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. If you need to apply for a passport, renew a passport, come on out, and again, feel free to reach out if you need more details about that. Also, the backlog of passports has gone down significantly compared to this time last year. Congresswoman Meng had pushed for that. She met with the Secretary of State, questioned him, pushed the State Department to reduce that backlog, so we're happy to see that taking place. Last week, we awarded $800,000 in federal funding to a group called Life Camp. They're a nonprofit gun violence prevention and intervention organization. They provide a range of services and programs, mostly in South Queens, and this funding will help them expand their services into our district in Central, West, and Northeast Queens. We, 2 weeks ago, brought the Greek ambassador to the United States. Thank you, Heather, for being there. So she could see the vibrant Greek community that exists here in Queens. And submissions have ended for our annual art contest. Last year, the winner was a high school student from Rego Park, so we'll see who wins this year. The winning entry is displayed in the Capitol for a whole year, and anybody who walks by it can see the artwork, even the President of the United States. So we're excited about that. We'll let you know who wins. Thanks for listening. Back to you. Oh, sorry.
Hi everybody, Alexa from Assemblyman Hevesi's office. Just some quick updates. We're continuing our park cleanup series, and our next one is going to be Saturday, May 18th, as part of the It's My Park Day, and that's going to be in McDonald Park from 11 to 2. Hopefully it won't take until 2, we'll get it clean before then, but that's a lot of time. And then just a quick budget update, since we did not yet have a state budget since you guys met last, even though it was well past April 1st deadline then. Assemblyman Hevesi fought for an increase and expanded child tax credit, and we secured $350 million to expand that tax credit to families that are low income, and it'll expand the credit for another year. The federal credit had expired, the state stepped in and funded it, that was set to go. We have a larger, bigger proposal that we're hoping to get passed next year, but this is a good stepping stone towards that. And then other local things happening. We are doing a Memorial Day essay contest with the schools in the district, the elementary schools, and the winner will be read and announced at the Kiwanis, or the Memorial Day parade. So that's what we got.
Okay, now we're gonna go to, thank you guys so much for sticking with us, we appreciate it. Next, we're gonna go to Ann Polito. Go ahead.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. On behalf of all of the mothers with us today, a happy and joyful Mother's Day. I hope everyone can hear me. We have a few events coming up this month. First, on Tuesday, May 14th at 6 p.m., we will be co-sponsoring our first Paraguayan Independence Celebration. The event will take place in the Helen Marshall Cultural Center at Queensboro Hall. On Wednesday, May 22nd at 10 a.m., we will hold our Memorial Day observance ceremony, which will be held at the Veterans Memorial Garden outside of Queensboro Hall. The following Wednesday, on May 29th at 12 p.m., we will host our Older Adult Appreciation Luncheon in the Helen Marshall Cultural Center at Queensboro Hall. And lastly, the next day, on Thursday, May 30th, our office will also host our Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month celebration at Borough Hall. The event will start at 6 p.m. You can always RSVP to all of these events on our website at queensbp.org/RSVP. Thank you all and have a great night.
All right, so we were expecting another rep, but they probably got hungry. All right, so that is it for this evening. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Second? Okay, go home. Again, June 18. June 18. Okay? Thank you guys.